Hello, welcome to Family Values. My name's Joe Woods.
My name's Tom Hicks.
This is your current and favourite podcast, basically examining the culture war and the hypocrisy around it and the partisan attitudes. It's been a fun week, mainly in regards to British politics, usual Tory infighting.
Blue on blue action, as Boris would say.
Oh God, yeah. But yeah, the usual kind of blue on blue action, the usual hypocrisy around it. We're going to get into the Kim Darroch issue and the absolute, particularly from people who have kind of sentiment towards the left, the hypocrisy around their opinions this time. Let's start. Do you want to give the first subject?
Yeah, we're going to be the Tory leadership debate, which was sufficiently depressing for everybody involved, I would say. If you're for the Tory candidates, then you were thinking, well, there's not a lot of answers coming around here. If you're against them, then it speaks for itself why that was depressing. But yeah, we had Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt playing their respective positions, but it really did turn into the Boris Johnson show throughout the leadership debate, and Jeremy Hunt did not help that in the slightest, I don't think.
I really do think Tuesday's debate, is a symptom and the greatest example as to why this leadership from the start has been a one-horse race. This has been basically as fixed as and I don't mean fixed in a literal sense, I don't mean in a conspiratorial sense, but it's as fixed as any any national election in Belarus. We know who's going to win.
Yeah.
We know who the membership has their vote on, and we know who is blustering their way to the top.
If it wasn't for the fact that Tories got so much backlash when Theresa May was coronated last time, there would have already been a coronation of Boris Johnson already, I think, because it's just so one-sided that there doesn't seem to be a lot of point for a leadership debate, particularly with the time constraints on Brexit, apart from just to show, look, we are giving the members a choice, even though everybody already knows what the members are going to pick.
I mean, getting into the crux of Tuesday night, I can see what Hunt was trying to do. For anyone who, didn't maybe see it with their own eyes or maybe wasn't listening, Hunt tried to play to the room. Hunt tried to take the usual and the predictable sort of action, the way Boris would present himself, blustering, using kind of metaphorical language, not answering questions, rambling on. He tried to use that to his own advantage and basically try to make himself look like the organised, Tory leader that he should be. And, he tried to play to the room and he tried to call out Boris and say, Boris, answer the question. Problem is, it's Boris's room.
Yeah, and Boris figured that out pretty early on, and you just see by the look of his face when he cracked a not too funny statement, but people were laughing and people were going along with it. And we might as well have been in a debate against a Labour leader with a Tory filled room at that point, because no one was really buying what Hunt was selling.
I want your honest opinion on this, right? Because I keep kind of doubting my own intuition on this, but is it Boris's to lose?
I would say so, yeah. I would say that it's been that way since the very start, and it's quite frankly, it's Boris's not just to lose, but it's Boris's to smash. Because all the polls on the, I think the big one is the Conservative Home website, which has the most trusted poll when it comes to Tory memberships.
Did that basically say or state as 70% of the membership?
It's been about 75% of the membership throughout the entire campaign, including the MP's portion of it, has Boris up at that amount. So if he doesn't get that, if he gets below 60%, even if he wins by 10 points, it's still going to look not as good. And you can see that with the press sort of coming along. There was an interesting point where the Tory memberships haven't received the amount of ballot papers that they would have expected by now, because everybody thought the Tory members were just going to get it, tick Boris's name, and it's sent back. So that's, I believe, a sort of way of people lowering expectations, as all politicians always do just before an election result, because it's just the smart political tactic to lower expectations.
Okay, and as usual, I want to look at this at the grassroots and the membership perspective, or not even from their perspective. I want to look at them, where basically, is this their fault?
The memberships.
Is it the membership's fault that we had this travesty of a debate on Tuesday and Johnson showed himself to be the usual blustering, bumbling idiot that he is, but yet he just can't lose? Because he should face at least polling repercussions for that.
He probably...
He was dreadful.
He was. But it's the thing about... When you have a leader who the base really like, they really don't want to get rid of him, and you can see that with Jeremy Corbyn as well, as it were. And I think the way that I don't think the BBC ITV should have accepted the way that they had presented that debate. Not the format or anything, but the timing of it. If you're going to do a leadership debate like that, you've got to do it, I would say, on the day that the ballot papers get sent out. So it actually gives opportunity for people to change their minds, whereas most people would have already sent their back or have already made up their mind. All these hustlings and these public discussions, and the Andrew Neil interview was only released yesterday.
Yeah.
Which is even more embarrassing for us. I haven't actually seen it, but
I've heard excerpts, and I say excerpts, I've heard, sound clips, and really the display by Boris over the last week, obviously from the debate and then from this Andrew Neil interview yesterday, he's become a little bit aggressive as well, and he's started to become a bit defensive. I if there was any justice in the world, Johnson would be paying the electoral price, in the sense of he'd be taking a hit in the polls. But I think we talk about the cultural wars, we talk about the divisiveness of politics today, and I just think the Tory membership is just entrenched in what they want and who they're looking for. And Johnson, let's be fucking honest, Johnson is not this protectionist kind of demagogue that the membership want. He's actually a liberal globalist. He just knows how to play to audiences. He knows how to win votes. Yeah,
he's astute at reading the political wind, as it were, but he's a lot better at conveying that these are his genuine politics than people like Hillary Clinton, for example, was another person who, on the first surface of it, seems similar, where she'll change her positions as soon as the polls move towards 50%. And I think Boris is like that, but instead of going for the general public, he's more concentrated on the Tory party membership.
He's smart to have done that. It just feels, purely from sort of a subjective standpoint, he's just disingenuous. He isn't, he's not following a path and an agenda that actually, as we know, actually fit around the ideology and world of Johnson. And look, to be fair, I sound like a hypocrite at the moment, because I'm usually the one who will talk about stepping away from ideology and doing and taking the side of practicality. And we're now post Brexit vote. We have the result. We've had the result for 3 years, and as we know, particularly the majority of people that voted Leave want a no-deal Brexit. And if, I suppose, Boris is just doing the practical thing by stating that he could do it,
and that is effectively his line and his main argument. I would like to ask a question of you, Joe, someone who's not inclined to vote for the Tory party anytime soon. Would you have preferred a Jay Puthreet-Vonk-like character who is more ideologically driven and who, quite frankly, is better on camera and I would say a more likeable person than most people in the Tory party, just as a sort of, in a similar way to, at least the start of his premiership as the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn was. You couldn't deny that he was a bloke that you wanted to at least have a chat with and that you could not hate after 10 minutes of talking with him.
Obviously, purely from a political standpoint, would I want Rees-Mogg, or a character like Rees-Mogg, a more kind of, populist, and someone who actually, in terms of economics and in terms of social conservatism, is actually to the right, so someone like Rees-Mogg.
Well, he came out in favour completely against abortion, which is, quite frankly, political suicide in this country.
I don't think at this point it is.
No?
Not necessarily, and I'll tell you why in a second, and actually I'll lead into it by saying this. Would I prefer him as leader of both the Tory party and Prime Minister of the country? Definitely not. I'm totally kind of... I believe he is, in a sense. If Johnson wins the election and he wins this leadership election, and he will, you essentially will have Rees-Mogg running the country, because Rees-Mogg leads the ERG, and the ERG is running the Tory party in a moment. Let's be fair.
That's a good point. Do you reckon he'll get a cabinet position then?
Yes, at least. Well, I'll say at least. I mean, you couldn't go any further. Yeah, he will have a cabinet position, and it will be under the guise of, because we need a cross section of Brexiteers and well-known Brexiteers. The reality is because he's been helping run this campaign.
Oh yeah, and if he was one of the first backers of Boris, and he could have easily had courted the support of the ERG and sort of went for it himself. It wasn't for the reality that he had already backed Boris in previous, even before the election campaigns already got going. He could have been in a position to actually make a run for it himself, but I don't think that at this point that would have gone down too well, because it would have had strokes of Michael Gove.
Well, I mean, with ERG, with the ERG basically backing Johnson in a minute and essentially running his election campaign for him. Also, I mean, let's be fair, there's been quite a few tricks probably pulled behind the scenes, in terms of probably trying to convince certain MPs to back Boris. There's probably been certain amounts of... I'm not going to go into conspiratorial mode here, because I don't really want to. But here's another point I'm going to make. If it wasn't Rees-Mogg, in terms of, we're talking at least pro-Brexit politicians, but also more on the kind of reactionary and a more kind of ideologically driven side. Who else could you think would have contended for leadership outside of this election? Like anyone who wasn't running in this election? Steve Baker, Williamson. Who do you imagine?
Off the top of my head, it would be really difficult to actually have a person who was that, because it's quite a small pool, because you've got to have that sort of, you sort of think about the Venn diagram of a situation. You've got to have someone who has been pro Brexit, preferably even before the referendum even got going. Yeah. Because Boris was on the fence for a long time about it as well.
Yeah.
And someone who is known to the public and who can at least, and who could try to run a little bit more moderately during the general election, because if you run as an ideological Tory, well, nobody has run as an ideological Tory in this country for a long time and won an election. So off the top of my head, I don't think I could name any sitting MP who would actually fit into that box.
Away from
the people that were already in the election, to Michael Goves and it was your man who got knocked out early, who was even more hard Brexit than Boris. You're
talking
Raab?
Dominic Raab. Yeah.
He could have potentially been, but he was and the EIRG were considering him for a little bit, but they realised that wasn't gonna he wasn't gonna win, and they didn't want to piss Boris off too much, so they went for him.
I think there's only really one person, particularly the ERG side of things, that I'd actually fear taking up leadership of both the Tory party and of the Prime Ministership in this country over Rees-Mogg. And I'm not treating Rees-Mogg as some bogeyman. At the end of the day, he's just a traditional Tory. If he was to become leader of the country, probably no more damage really, away from probably maybe to workers' rights and damage than what Johnson would kind of inflict. And I'd probably, in terms of Johnson's real ideology as like an economic liberal, a social liberal, slightly more globalist, I'd probably fall in line somewhat with Johnson. We probably share a lot of the same ideas on kind of flat tax rates and generally got a lot of kind of sort of economically liberal and business friendly economic policies. But there's only one person I fear more than those two, and that's probably someone like Mark Francois.